The Zarnathi Empire ruled the galaxy with unmatched power, their warships spreading fear wherever they went. For centuries, they had crushed every enemy, silenced every rebellion, and destroyed every planet that dared to resist. Their most terrifying weapon was the Stormfire fleet, a massive collection of over 1,000 warships, each equipped with deadly energy weapons and protected by thick, glowing shields that no known weapon could pierce. The fleet moved like a storm through space, its black hulls absorbing starlight, its engines roaring like thunder in the void. Whenever it arrived, civilizations surrendered before the first shot was fired. The Zarnathi had become arrogant, proud of their perfect record. They called their fleet Unbeatable, and everyone else believed it. Across the stars, the name alone was enough to bring fear. No one dared to challenge them. That is, until the fleet set its course for a small, blue planet on the edge of the galaxy, a place called Earth. The humans had not been part of the galactic community for long. Most advanced species saw them as new, unimportant, and barely worth noticing. Earth had no grand empire, no vast colonies, and no reputation for strength. But the humans had something else: curiosity, determination, and a strange ability to adapt quickly. They had quietly observed other species, learned from their mistakes, and slowly developed technologies in secret. While the rest of the galaxy looked down on them, Earth was preparing. For decades, hidden away from the eyes of the galaxy, the humans built their defenses, experimented with new forms of warfare, and studied the Zarnathi's movements. They had seen the destruction the Stormfire fleet caused on other worlds, and knew that one day it might come for them too. And now, that day had arrived. The Zarnathi command ship, larger than a city, hovered at the edge of Earth's solar system. Inside, Grand Admiral Threx stood before a massive screen showing Earth's peaceful blue surface. He sneered. "This will be quick," he said to his officers. "One strike, and they will beg for mercy." His confidence was unshakable. After all, no one had ever stood against them and survived. But what Threx didn't know was that his enemy was unlike anything he had faced before. Humanity had united under one banner: the United Human Defense Command, and activated Project Vanguard, a hidden fleet of human warships equipped with advanced stealth systems, energy disruptors, and AI-guided strategies. These ships had never been seen before. They were hidden under Earth's surface, on the moon, and even in deep space. The project had been Earth's biggest secret, and now it was ready. When the Zarnathi sent a transmission demanding Earth's surrender, the human leaders sent back a message that shocked the Empire: "We do not kneel." It was short, calm, and clear. And with those 4 words, the battle for Earth had begun. Grand Admiral Threx laughed when he heard the message. "Fools," he said. "Prepare the assault." The Stormfire fleet began its advance, warships forming tight attack patterns as they moved toward the planet. But something unexpected happened. The fleet started losing contact with its scout ships. One by one, the smaller vessels vanished from their screens. No explosions, no distress signals, just silence. Confused, Threx ordered his ships to search the surrounding area, but all they found were empty spaces and strange reading signs of high-level electronic warfare. He had underestimated his enemy. Meanwhile, Earth's secret fleet activated. Human warships emerged from the shadows, their sleek black forms reflecting nothing. They were silent hunters in the dark, guided by strategy, not numbers. Instead of charging into battle, they set traps. They lured Zarnathi ships into asteroid fields filled with hidden mines, used false signals to mislead their formations, and hacked into their systems to shut down targeting controls. In one daring move, a human ship sacrificed itself to drag a Zarnathi cruiser into a gravity well, pulling both into a black hole. The message was clear: humans were not playing by the same rules. As the hours passed, more and more Zarnathi ships were lost. The Empire had come expecting a weak opponent, but found a species that refused to die quietly. Back on the flagship, Threx slammed his fist on the control panel. "How is this possible?" he shouted. "They are primitives." But the truth was becoming impossible to ignore. This enemy had studied them, understood them, and had created strategies designed to exploit every weakness the Zarnathi didn't know they had. It wasn't just technology that gave humans an edge. It was their creativity, their unpredictability, and most of all, their refusal to give up. The Zarnathi had fought wars like a machine, organized, calculated, cold. But humans fought like survivors with emotion, instinct, and a deep desire to protect their home. For the first time in Zarnathi history, the Stormfire fleet was forced to retreat. Grand Admiral Threx ordered the remaining ships to fall back, hoping to regroup and return stronger. But he left with something more dangerous than damaged ships. He left with fear. The message had been sent across the galaxy. Humanity would not be conquered easily. The Unbeatable fleet had met its match, not in firepower, but in spirit. And while Earth celebrated quietly, knowing the war was far from over, the rest of the galaxy watched in silence. If humans could do this to the Zarnathi, what else were they capable of? When the first wave of the Zarnathi fleet approached the edge of the solar system, Earth did not panic. There was no screaming, no chaos on the streets. Instead, the world grew quiet, like the silence before a storm. Leaders across every nation stopped their internal conflicts and united under one flag, the United Human Defense Command. The years of preparation were finally about to be tested. Deep beneath the surface of Earth, in hidden bunkers and underground command centers, lights came on and systems activated. Across the oceans, hidden submarines received their orders. From the moon's dark side, long dormant silos opened, revealing sleek black shapes rising into orbit. This was not the humanity of old, divided by borders or greed. This was a species that had been watching, planning, and preparing in silence for the day they would no longer be ignored. Earth's greatest secret, known only to a few high-ranking officials, was now ready to be revealed. Project Vanguard, a fleet of warships not built for show, but for survival. Each ship had been crafted with a mix of stolen alien technology and human innovation. They didn't rely on brute force, but on strategy, deception, and creativity. While the Zarnathi used predictable formations and brute firepower, humans had designed their ships to move like shadows, attack like wolves, and disappear before the enemy could even react. As the Zarnathi demanded surrender through a cold and threatening broadcast, Earth's reply was short and fearless: "We do not kneel." That single line, spoken in calm defiance, spread across every news channel and encrypted military feed. It wasn't a declaration of arrogance. It was a signal that humanity was done hiding. In orbit, the first human fleet formed a scattered wall of defense, seemingly disorganized, but every move had purpose. Civilian satellites were pulled offline. Decoys were launched. Ships went dark. The Zarnathi, used to fighting enemies who begged for mercy, saw this as desperation. They had no idea it was part of the plan. The human commanders had no intention of meeting the enemy head-on. They intended to fight this war like no one ever had. Captain Alara Miles, one of Earth's top tacticians, stood aboard the HSS Phantom Edge, a mid-sized stealth cruiser built for high-risk operations. Her eyes studied the star map, watching the Zarnathi fleet's slow but confident approach. She knew they believed victory was guaranteed. That belief would be their undoing. Alara gave the signal, and the trap was set. Across space, human ships activated their electronic warfare suites, launching invisible waves of interference that confused enemy targeting systems. Drones disguised as real warships flew in erratic patterns, leading the Zarnathi into areas mined with gravity bombs. By the time the Zarnathi noticed they were being misled, 5 of their cruisers were gone. The humans didn't celebrate. They recalculated, reloaded, and struck again. Back on Earth, the control center beneath the Andes Mountains buzzed with quiet intensity. Dozens of officers worked in sync, watching live battle feeds, updating commands, and coordinating with the hidden defense units spread across the solar system. General Amina Clark, the leader of UHDC, stood at the center, calm and focused. Her strategy was clear: do not engage in full force, unless absolutely necessary. Let them waste energy. Let them overextend. Humanity's strength was not in numbers, but in how far they were willing to go to protect their home. They had studied the Zarnathi's battle logs, their patterns, their pride. Humans had learned to think like them, then think 10 steps ahead. As the battle continued, more Zarnathi ships arrived, confident in their superior firepower. But confidence turned to confusion as they found themselves outmaneuvered by smaller, faster ships that seemed to be everywhere and nowhere at once. Human engineers had developed cloaking tech using principles the Zarnathi had never considered, using fluctuating gravity fields to bend light and sound. When the first Zarnathi dreadnought was destroyed by a blast that seemed to come from empty space, fear spread among their ranks. No one had ever destroyed one of their dreadnoughts before, not like that. Meanwhile, Earth's secret moon base activated its second phase. Long-range cannons fired invisible plasma rounds guided by AI that calculated shifts in cosmic wind and solar interference. Missiles with split-core warheads broke apart mid-flight, becoming dozens of smaller, faster projectiles that overwhelmed Zarnathi shields. Each human attack was unexpected, unconventional, and terrifyingly effective. The Zarnathi commanders struggled to understand how a planet they had considered primitive was now turning the tide of battle. On board the command ship, Grand Admiral Threx watched as his perfect strategy unraveled. His officers argued, his systems failed, and his confidence began to crack. He ordered reinforcements, but they were too far behind. In desperation, he targeted civilian infrastructure, hoping fear would force humanity to surrender. But Earth had already evacuated its cities and replaced key networks with decoys. The civilians were hidden, the planet was prepared, and the humans were not afraid. In fact, they were just getting started. A new signal from Earth reached the Zarnathi fleet, not a threat, but a warning. You came to conquer. You will leave in pieces. The words echoed through their systems, unstoppable, untraceable. The humans had not only fought back, they had entered the Zarnathi systems and planted fear in their minds. Across the stars, other species began to take notice. Messages were sent in secret. Hidden civilizations whispered to each other, the humans are fighting back. And they're winning. Some offered quiet support. Others watched in silence, waiting to see how far Earth would go. And deep in the heart of Earth's moon, engineers prepared the final phase of Project Vanguard, an experimental weapon so dangerous it had never been tested. The humans didn't want to use it. They hoped they wouldn't need to. But if the Zarnathi refused to retreat, it would be unleashed. The Zarnathi fleet, once proud and organized, had fallen into chaos. Ships collided, commands were delayed, and morale collapsed. Threx ordered a retreat, unwilling to admit defeat but desperate to survive. As the fleet vanished into hyperspace, Earth didn't cheer loudly. There were no grand parades, just quiet relief and silent preparation. Because they knew this was not the end. The Zarnathi would return. And when they did, Earth would be ready. The galaxy now understood something it had never believed before: humans were not weak. They were not afraid. They were not to be conquered. They were to be respected or feared. The silence of space was broken as the Zarnathi fleet entered Earth's orbit for the second time, not with fear, but with vengeance. Their pride had been damaged, their reputation questioned, and now they were here to erase the mistake they had made by underestimating humanity. But this time, Earth was not only ready, they were waiting. Far above the planet's surface, the human fleet was no longer scattered in decoys and diversions. This time they were unified, bold, and in full formation. Project Vanguard was no longer a secret. It had become Earth's shield and sword. The space around the planet shimmered with cloaked ships, invisible drones, and defensive satellites charged with enough power to crack asteroids in half. Inside the lead ship, HSS Phantom Edge, Captain Alara Miles stood tall, calm and focused. She had seen how the Zarnathi moved, how they attacked, and how they thought. Her plan wasn't to match them in strength, but to trap them in their own arrogance. As the enemy ships closed in, the tension rose. Each second felt like a wire stretched tighter and tighter, until finally it snapped. A single Zarnathi scout ship fired a plasma bolt at a human frigate, and in that moment, the first real battle began. The human ship didn't fall, it responded with a multi-angle counterattack that hit the scout from 6 different directions at once, confusing its defenses and ripping it apart in seconds. That sudden strike shook the Zarnathi formation, but they pressed forward, thinking brute force would carry them to victory. What they didn't see were the thousands of human drones hidden in the shadows of asteroids and planetary rings. Once the Zarnathi entered the kill zone, every drone activated at once, surrounding the enemy ships like a school of predators. Each drone carried smart weapons missiles that adapted mid-flight, beams that tracked energy signatures, and EMP bursts that blinded enemy sensors. On the ground, the people of Earth watched in silence from underground shelters and command bunkers. They couldn't see every detail of the battle, but they could feel its weight. Everyone knew what was at stake. Humanity had never fought a space war like this before, but they were no strangers to impossible odds. The Zarnathi targeted the outermost defense line, trying to break through quickly, but human ships responded with perfect coordination. They moved like dancers in the dark, shifting positions in seconds, creating openings and closing traps faster than the enemy could react. The HSS Crimson Star, a heavy destroyer with experimental shielding, took the brunt of the enemy's barrage and held firm, buying time for the smaller ships to outflank the enemy. Explosions flashed like stars being born and dying in an instant. Each Zarnathi loss chipped away at their belief in superiority. They had never seen a species fight like this. The humans didn't retreat when hit, they adapted. They didn't panic, they planned. In the middle of the chaos, Alara ordered Operation Eclipse, a maneuver where 3 stealth ships would slip behind enemy lines and strike the flagship directly. The mission was risky, almost suicidal, but it was the only way to break the Zarnathi command structure. As the stealth ships moved silently through the battle, hiding in radiation fields and using enemy wreckage as cover, the rest of the human fleet increased pressure on the front lines to distract the enemy. The plan worked. The Zarnathi flagship, massive and overconfident, never saw the attack coming. In one perfect moment, all 3 stealth ships fired at its vulnerable core. The explosion was blinding, and for the first time, the enemy panicked. With their flagship gone, their command chain fractured. Orders became confused, movements became clumsy, and their formations started falling apart. The humans didn't let up. They pressed harder, not to destroy, but to force a retreat. Earth didn't want total war, it wanted survival and respect. But if the enemy refused to give it, humanity would take it by force. Across the battlefield, new Zarnathi ships jumped in, trying to regain control, but the humans were ready. The HSS Tempest, equipped with experimental gravity weapons, created artificial anomalies that pulled enemy ships off course, smashing them into one another or flinging them into deep space. The battlefield had become a maze of shifting strategies, deadly traps, and relentless human creativity. What the Zarnathi had never understood was that humans were not just survivors, they were innovators. They didn't fight the same way twice. Each failure became a lesson, and each lesson became a weapon. As more Zarnathi ships fell, the remaining commanders gave the order to retreat, not because they were defeated by power, but because they could no longer understand the enemy they were fighting. As the enemy fled, limping through space with damaged hulls and broken pride, Earth didn't celebrate with noise, it simply stood taller. The victory was not just military, it was psychological. The galaxy had watched. And the message was now clear: humanity was not to be conquered. They had defended their home, not with the biggest guns, but with the sharpest minds, the boldest moves, and the courage to face giants without blinking. This first clash would be remembered not as a single battle, but as the moment humanity stepped into the galactic stage as something new, something terrifying to those who had once seen them as weak. It was only the beginning. The space around Earth remained scarred with wreckage, burnt metal floating silently as a reminder of the recent battle. But inside the war rooms of the Human Defense Alliance, the mood was not one of celebration, it was preparation. They knew the Zarnathi wouldn't accept defeat so easily. After their unexpected retreat, human analysts detected strange signals from deep space, encrypted transmissions bouncing between hidden outposts, and movements suggesting that the enemy was regrouping faster than anyone expected. Humanity's victory in the first clash had shaken the galaxy, but it had also drawn dangerous attention. The Zarnathi Empire, now angry and humiliated, had sent for reinforcements from their distant sectors. Their next move would not be to test Earth's strength again, it would be a full-scale invasion. Earth had no choice but to act first. In secret, a counterstrike was planned not for destruction, but for control. Humanity needed to shift the war into enemy territory, to make them fight where they weren't ready. The plan was dangerous, bold, and had never been attempted before. Operation Veilbreaker would take the war to the enemy's communication relay station hidden on the dark edge of the Nabari Drift, a region full of electrical storms and gravitational rifts where sensors failed and navigation systems often malfunctioned. It was the perfect hiding place, and if humanity could destroy that relay, they would cut the Zarnathi off from their fleet command. Captain Elora Miles once again led the charge, commanding a special strike group equipped with advanced stealth tech, EMP warheads, and deep space traversal engines built just for this mission. Her ship, the HSS Midnight Veil, moved like a shadow across the stars, invisible to standard scans. Alongside her, 5 other ships formed a silent blade aimed straight at the heart of the enemy's network. ASA approached the Nabari Drift. The crew began to feel the pressure. Time seemed slower, each second stretched by the weight of the unknown. They were entering a region no human ship had ever returned from, and every screen on the bridge flickered with static as the gravitational waves twisted around them. But the team held strong. They had trained for this, and they knew failure meant giving the enemy their voice back, a voice that would rally even more war fleets against Earth. Inside the drift, everything became unstable. Signals were lost, hulls groaned under pressure, and the ships could only communicate using old-fashioned laser pulses. But then they found it. Floating in the dead zone of space, hidden behind layers of magnetic fog, the Zarnathi relay station appeared like a dark wound in the stars. The humans couldn't believe its size, an enormous spire stretching like a tower across nothingness, guarded by automated sentries and silent killer drones. Elora ordered silence. The strike had to be perfect. One mistake, and the enemy would respond in force. Using the drift's unstable energy to mask their approach, the team spread out. The first wave disabled the outer sentries with precision MPs, causing chain reactions in their power cores. The second wave targeted the main tower support rings, planting timed explosives designed to collapse its structure inward. But just as they prepared the final blow, the enemy arrived. A Zarnathi patrol fleet, returning from the edge, stumbled upon the human team too early. Elora had no choice. She ordered an immediate assault. The battle was brutal. Human ships were fast and cloaked, but the Zarnathi had raw numbers and heavy armor. The Midnight Veil danced between enemy fire, launching countermeasures and precision strikes, all while guiding the rest of the fleet through chaotic turbulence. Explosions lit up the fog, and for a moment it felt like the humans would be overwhelmed. But then, something unexpected happened. The gravitational storms of the drift, once seen as a danger, became their weapon. Elora ordered her ships to bait the enemy toward the rift's center, where space-time was unstable. As predicted, the heavier Zarnathi ships struggled to maneuver, and began colliding with debris and being pulled apart by gravitational spikes. One by one, their numbers fell, and in the chaos, the humans completed the objective. The relay tower collapsed with a thunderous energy surge that echoed through the void. The Zarnathi fleet, now cut off from command, scattered and fled in panic. With the relay destroyed, all nearby enemy ships were now deaf and blind, unable to receive orders or coordinate attacks. Humanity had done the impossible again. They had turned the tide of the war. What began as a desperate defense had now shifted into a campaign of calculated strikes, bold missions, and psychological victories. Across the galaxy, the story spread fast. Humans had entered the most dangerous region of space, destroyed a key Zarnathi command post, and escaped alive. On Earth, people came out of bunkers and shelters with cautious hope. The skies were quiet again, but this time they felt safer, stronger. In the upper councils of the Human Defense Alliance, new plans were drawn, plans not just to survive, but to push forward, to break the myth of Zarnathi supremacy forever. Meanwhile, inside the enemy's war chambers, panic began to spread. They had never lost a communication station before. They had never faced an enemy that turned nature itself into a weapon. Their admirals started to question everything. How could a young species, one they had once dismissed as primitive, outmaneuver them twice? Fear began to creep in, not just fear of humans, but fear of what humans might become. And so, the war was no longer about territory or control, it became a battle of belief. The Zarnathi were no longer certain of their power. Humanity had done more than destroy ships and stations, they had shattered the illusion of invincibility. And now, with momentum shifting, Earth prepared for the next move. Because this war was far from over, but for the first time, it was being fought on human terms. The galaxy was no longer the same. After the destruction of the Zarnathi relay station in the Nebari Drift, everything changed. Once feared across the stars, the Zarnathi Empire now struggled to maintain control over its scattered fleets, many of which had lost communication and retreated in confusion. Humanity, once seen as a fragile and new species, had become a rising force no longer ignored or underestimated. But despite their recent victories, human leaders knew this was not the end. They had pushed the enemy back, but not broken them. Somewhere deep within the Zarnathi core systems, their high command still stood, angry and embarrassed, planning revenge with whatever resources they could gather. Earth's intelligence revealed that the Zarnathi had begun building a new command ship, larger and more powerful than any warship seen before. This mobile fortress, called the Zarquan, was designed to crush resistance in a single strike and carry the last hope of restoring Zarnathi dominance. It was said to be surrounded by a deadly defense grid with enough energy weapons to destroy an entire planet. If it launched, Earth would never survive the counterattack. Humanity had no choice. They had to strike first and end the war before it began again. The plan was simple but deadly: locate the Zarquan, infiltrate its outer defenses, and destroy its core reactor before it became fully operational. This time, failure would not just mean losing a battle, it would mean extinction. The responsibility fell once again on Captain Alara Miles and her crew aboard the HSS Midnight Vale. They were no longer just soldiers, they were symbols of human resilience, legends in the making. Alongside them flew a fleet of elite ships chosen for speed, stealth, and precision. They traveled through uncharted space, avoiding known Zarnathi patrol routes, hiding in asteroid fields, and navigating solar storms to reach the enemy's final stronghold. The journey took days, and tension never left the crew. Each moment was heavy with the fear of detection, each hour a reminder of what was at stake. When they finally reached the target, it took their breath away. The Zarquan hung in space like a dark moon, massive and terrifying. It was still under construction, surrounded by dozens of support vessels and automated turrets, but its core was already active, pulsing with dangerous energy. There would be no second chance. The humans launched their attack under the cover of a cosmic storm, using the radiation to blind enemy sensors. The outer defense ships responded quickly, but they were caught off guard by the precision and bravery of the human pilots. One by one, the automated turrets were disabled, and a small team, including Alara herself, entered the Zarquan through a hidden maintenance hatch near its lower engine bay. Inside the fortress, the team moved quickly through silent corridors filled with half-assembled weapons and unfinished walls. The ship was still being built, but it was already deadly. They avoided patrols, bypassed traps, and reached the central reactor chamber. It was larger than they imagined, glowing blue and humming with power. Just as they prepared to plant explosives, alarms rang through the structure. The Zarnathi had discovered them. Elite enemy soldiers arrived from all sides, and a fierce battle began in the heart of the monster ship. Alara and her team fought with everything they had, knowing this moment would decide the future of their kind. They moved like shadows, striking with precision, but the enemy's numbers were growing. One of the engineers, badly wounded, managed to arm the explosive core with a manual trigger. There would be no timer. Someone had to stay behind to detonate it. Alara didn't hesitate. She ordered her team to leave while she held the line. Her voice was calm, steady, and filled with quiet pride. As the rest of the squad escaped through emergency tunnels, Alara stood alone in the center of the reactor, wounded but unshaken. She watched the countdown begin, then closed her eyes, thinking of Earth, of the people she had sworn to protect. The explosion that followed tore through the Zarquan, cracking its core and sending shockwaves across the system. Enemy ships caught in the blast were ripped apart, and those that remained fled in panic. From their distant positions, human ships watched as the fortress burned and collapsed, its remains swallowed by a nearby gravity well. The mission was complete. The final blow had been struck. With their superweapon gone and morale shattered, the Zarnathi High Command surrendered within weeks. Peace treaties were forced upon them, and their empire crumbled as other species they had once ruled began to rise against them. Earth, once alone and fragile, now stood as a symbol of courage, strategy, and hope. Statues of Captain Ella Ramiles were built in every human colony, and her name was remembered in songs and stories told across the stars. She had given her life not for glory, but for the future of her species. And in doing so, she had changed the galaxy forever. Humanity had done the impossible. They had faced the unbeatable, survived the unstoppable, and proved to every race in the galaxy that they were not just worthy of respect, they were a force to be feared. The war had started with fear, but it ended with unity. For the first time in history, the galaxy knew what it meant to stand against humans and lose. And though the stars remained vast and dangerous, Earth would never face them in fear again. They had earned their place, not through numbers, not through technology alone, but through will, sacrifice, and the unbreakable spirit that made them truly human.